Hey, what's up everybody? Just getting back to you as promised with an overview of how these data table items work. So I did want to start by pointing out that our level going from fugitive back to Samaritan wasn't a bug. You can see this value here clear on reset. That is going to tell us if true when the reset time is called, it's going to clear all levels. And you can see everything here is commented in tooltips. So if you have an idea of what these or if you don't have an idea of what these values do and you're curious, feel free to check the tooltips. They're all tooltipped, and we'll give you kind of a good idea what to do. But just to kind of get you started here, because there are a couple of things that out of the box are going to be a little wonky. They might not be how you want them to act immediately. The next thing I want to cover here is how as soon as I interacted with the box, that forced me to level 1 and immediately took me back to level 0. So to get past that, I set my current value to 25% of my max value. That is actually ridiculously high for how high it needs to be, but it's just to be safe, to make sure that that value is not cleared. To show you how this works now, it's going to immediately start me at a value of 25 so that when the reset timer is called, it's not going to automatically reset my value. So that's something that I thought that you would immediately experience out of the box. It's going to kind of be frustrating for you when you're getting this set up. But you'll see here that now when I interact with it, I started a wanted level with 25 instead. And if you just want to see that working on the client too, to make sure this is all working online too, I'll show you that as well. So when you interact, it starts you at wanted level 25, and of course everybody's spawning relative to me instead of at a defined transform in a bounding box of about 1500 by 1500. So that's kind of what's going on with these values here. If you want to check that to false and spawn them at a defined transform, say at max or at most wanted, you want somebody to spawn at the end of the level, you can change that value at runtime however you need to. And you can also determine how the reset timer runs, how long it runs until it clears, how long to pause in between notorious actions, things like that. All these values are determined by this data table. If you don't want to determine them by a data table, if you want to set them individually inside of the component itself, you can do that. All you have to do is check this load from data table bool to false and then set the values as you need to inside of the component. You can also change the data table for each unique actor if you need to, and run your own levels independent of actor components how you need to. Obviously don't mess with the do not edit values, there's no point. You can determine your levels by action tags here. So for instance, I ran a steal action and immediately forced me to level 1. That's how we set that up here. But then since I didn't force a level when we ran the continuous update, we ran a steal action with a value of 2.5. So then it took 2.5 plus 1 times 1.1, and that was our update value. Or it took 2.5 plus whatever the update step was times the update rate for the current level that we're at. So say we are at like level Notorious, it would have taken 2.5 plus 1 times 1.25, and that would have been the rate that we were updating at. So if you want to change those uniquely for each actor, for instance, I think I changed this in the weapon, in the base weapon. Yeah, so I changed this here. So attack actions for weapons are a value of 25 instead of 5. Just to kind of change it up. So say somebody throws a punch, that's not as dangerous as, shooting at somebody, obviously. So you can manipulate those values however you need to uniquely for each action tag. You can also toggle which channel we trace for if you have your own unique trace channels, so you don't want to create overhead and things like that. I set that up so it's real easy for you. You can toggle whether or not your current value is drained when the timer is called. So this is going to keep you at a current value. Say when I run the update to level 1 and hit a value of 25, it's going to pause me at value 25 until that timer hits 0, and then it'll clear my level. This is kind of a good use case in case you hit level 3 or something like that and you don't want your player to continually drain their value. You want them to have to hit that reset timer to reset their value. You can run something off of an event dispatcher to toggle this bool if you need to, or however you want to run that behavior. You also have some spawn bools to basically keep you from spawning too many actors on certain levels. So say when we're running our timer and our value is resetting back to 0, you don't want to keep spawning police forces as players are losing levels. So we check this value only spawn on greater levels to true, but if you don't want that to run like that, then you can of course check that to false. You can also check only spawn if a level is a different level. So if we're running a continuous force of level 1, we don't want to keep spawning actors on level 1 when we're forcing level 1, things like that. You can handle all of that. You can determine how we notify other actors, whether or not we force it, whether or not we notify other players, or whether or not we notify at all. And we can also determine whether or not we notify if we're notorious. So say when I hit level 1, I can't notify to say somebody else is doing something bad because I'm already a criminal, things like that. You of course have your team tags and your owner IDs, your trace ranges, and your view angle. The view angle helps you determine whether or not you're actually seeing a notorious action. So for instance, if an AI is turned completely the opposite direction from me and I steal an item, they're not going to see that as notorious because they actually didn't see the item unless I'm forcing the notify. So if you want to, say, make a can of food only be notorious to be stolen if somebody sees it, you just check that bool to false and then set the view angle for however you need to for whichever actors are potentially watching that item. And of course you have this option here to debug your traces to make sure everything's tracing right. But that's the best overview I can give you of what's going on in the component in terms of these values. To call interactions, the best way to do it is through the function library do notify. So what we're doing, the notoriety owner is the owner that's going to be receiving the notoriety action. So for instance, when we shoot the gun, it's going to notify the owner of the gun, which is our instigator, or it's going to notify everybody that the instigator of the gun, which is the player that owns the gun, that they're performing a notorious action. The object that's sending out the notification is the gun, so we're going to use the gun's default values to perform the notoriety action. If we want to do a range notify, it's going to do a trace, otherwise it's going to try to find a direct actor and send a notification directly to an actor. We force a notify if no ally, so force notify if no ally, basically. If we're not skipping the ally check, we're going to trace out and try to find an ally. If we did the ally check and didn't find an ally, we can force the notify regardless with this bool here. And then of course this bool here skips the ally check completely. It's kind of a thing to clear up overhead so you don't do that huge trace and try to find somebody. If you just immediately know that you're going to be forcing an action when a gunshot, then you can go ahead and skip that ally check. And then the interaction action tag is obviously the tag that we use to look up the value to either force the level or update the value by. And then this bool here is just, since this is the parent class of the weapon, I just put this here to make it easy to override the function in the child class, so we don't have to override this whole function and change everything. We can just check this bool. So when we go to the notify rifle, by default we're doing a notify on attack, but we're doing an ally check by default on attack, so we're only checking to see, we're only doing a notify if an AI is nearby. Since this is a team tag, the gun is owned by an AI technically. When we do the ally check, it's going to notify an AI if an AI is nearby. So when we're Samaritan and we're shooting the gun and there's no AI near us, no police forces checking to make sure that we're, doing everything right, we're not going to notify anybody. But as soon as we hit level 1, we're going to skip that ally check and force notification regardless of whether or not an AI is near us. If you still only want the gun to do a notify if an AI is near it, you just go ahead and stop this check here, and it's only going to notify if an AI is nearby. Really, other than that, the basic overlaps, when we interact with the overlap, we're going to reset the levels. The continual overlap doesn't force a level on notify, so it just forces a steal every time it's interacting with. And since interaction is called on a timer, it's going to force that interaction every second. And then this is just the base interactable that handles, notifies, changes owners if it's interacted with, and all that kind of stuff. It has all these bools set up. So if you want to make it really easy to just implement a base interactable item, you just make it a child of this class here. Everything is handled by that. It handles all the basic replication needs for the item as well. But yeah, everything that you interact with in the game is derived, or in the template is derived from the interaction base. So the best way to get started is to just reparent whatever actor you want to interact with to the interaction base, and it's going to kind of handle everything out of the box for you. And then this is just kind of going over the interaction timer here. It sets the timer on play and then checks to make sure that, or checks to see who's interacting with it. Whoever's interacting with it gets an interact event called on them. And to be honest, that's it. On our website, obviously this video is probably really long and boring, and if you've made it this far, congratulations. You did better than I did, because I got pretty bored just explaining everything here to you. I'm going to put up a couple of quick integration guides online. To be honest, there's not really a whole lot to do other than just calling the doNotify function. There's also a couple of other functions in the Blueprint function library that's not named properly. I'll fix that here in a second. You can call these as needed, but these are pretty much here. They're already implemented as needed in doNotify and in the component itself. You can see here everything is handled by interface events, and everything is called kind of already by the doNotify function. Everything was put in a function library and handled through interface to make it easy for you to pull those functions out and use them as needed, but you really don't have to. You can just call the doNotify function. It's going to run everything basically out of the box how you need it. But yeah, I hope this video wasn't too boring. I hope you got something from it, and I hope you're going to get something from the component. If you have any questions, if you need anything at all, just hit me up at the support website and we'll get you taken care of. And I hope you guys have a great day.